Imagine if Coachella of 2019 consisted of drugs, nudity, hunger, and bad sanitation, yet came complete with peace and music. Just 50 years ago, before then, was a festival that had all of those things. That usually wouldn't slide today, but it is remembered as an experience filled with love and movement. Today I'll be informing the class on the Woodstock Music Festival in 1969. In order to do so, I will do three things. First, I will explain how the festival was abruptly organized. Then I will talk about the faulty issues caused by the lack of adequate facilities and sufficient management. Finally, I will discuss how the festival had brought unity within different communities from the impactful power of music. The Woodstock Music Festival was an idea that began between John Roberts, Joel Rosenman, Artie Kornfeld, and Michael Lang. These four men were entrepreneurs who formed Woodstock Ventures, a production company. They had planned for an investment opportunity by hosting a big music festival somewhere in New York. They had initially decided to hold the event at Howard Mills Industrial Park in Walk Hill, New York, but that was until town officials backed out in fear of the possibility of something going wrong. After many rejections, a dairy farmer named Max Yasgur offered to rent part of his land in the White Lakes area of Bethel, New York, despite the many objections of local residents. Since the planned date of the event was only a month away, Woodstock Ventures immediately took the offer and the location was finalized. The festival was set for a weekend in August from Friday the 15th to Sunday the 17th of 1969. Tickets would cost $18. It was anticipated that 50,000 people were going to show up, but by August 13th, over 100,000 tickets were pre-sold. About 500,000 people had shown up, yet organizers did not have enough time to set up fences, gates, and ticket booths, nor were there enough facilities to accommodate for the number of people who were not expected to show up. The only thing that was nearly completed was the stage. It was ultimately decided to make the festival a free event. The large number of people who arrived at the festival had overwhelmed the concert organizers. According to Jennifer Van Evera in her article Woodstock at 50 Fascinating Facts About the Weekend That Defined a Generation from the 2019 publication of the CBC, the local town of Bethel, with a population of 2,366, were so upset that an estimated 400,000 people would descend on the rural land that they called for a boycott. Traffic became such an issue that some had to park their cars miles away and walk to the venue. Some were even sitting in traffic for over 8 hours. Many potential attendees had chosen to leave due to the terrible traffic. The supply of food and water, unsurprisingly, became just as much of an issue, since far more people showed up than what was planned. The food concessions had started to run out quick, forcing people to find food wherever they could. The stores and restaurants in Bethel, in the town nearby, had also ran out of food. However, some had brought their own food and water and ended up sharing it. It got so bad that a helicopter had to fly food to the event made by volunteers from the community. The lack of accessible sanitation became just as much of an issue. Many portables were available, but it wasn't enough for the growing amount of people, which quickly led to many long lines. Others decided to go wherever they could. The nearby pond became a popular spot for bathing and skinny dipping. Coincidentally, the weather for the entire weekend was just as horrible. It rained constantly, leaving the ground all muddy. It also created delays between performers in fear that equipment on stage would ruin and become a hazard. There were unfortunately 2 deaths, one from a drug overdose and the other from a tractor accident. There were many other medical emergencies attended by volunteer nurses and doctors that were primarily minimal, such as feet injuries and food poisoning. The aftermath of the festival consisted of enormous amounts of garbage all over the land. Woodstock Ventures were sued by the farmers whose land had been destroyed from the event. According to Brad Tuttle in his article, Here's How Much Woodstock Performers Got Paid 50 Years Ago and Who's the Richest Star Now, from the 2019 publication of Money, organizers behind the legendary music festival in upstate New York said they wound up $1.3 million in debt after the historic 1969 event, roughly $9 million in today's dollars. However, the lawsuits and debt were paid off a year later after the release of a successful documentary on the festival, though the state passed laws to ensure that the chaos that occurred from the festival would never happen again. Throughout the course of the festival, 32 acts had performed. Many of the talented acts were well known and idolized. Arlo Guthrie and Joan Baez were amongst the 9 performers who appeared on the first day. The second day features the Grateful Dead, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Janis Joplin, and The Who, amongst many others. The final day's performers included Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Crosby, Nash, Stills, and Young, and Jimi Hendrix. Because of the bad weather that led to technical difficulties, many performers had performed way later and longer than they were supposed to. For example, Jimi Hendrix, the last performer, had begun his performance the morning after the event was supposed to end. His famous rendition of that Star-Spangled Banner was thought to be unpatriotic because of its bizarre sound and style, and how the country was seen at the time, though that was far from it. According to Jacqueline Ramsey in her paper Peace, Love, and Politics, How Woodstock of 1969 epitomized the relationship between social movements and music, from the 2019 publication of the Usenet College Digital Commons. It was not seen as an attack on America, but a powerful and poignant commentary on the state of the country. Many acts had declined to appear at the festival and regretted that decision, as the event had given the acts who did show up the most notability. However, the crowds included a diverse group of people from different backgrounds. There were anti-war protesters, pro and anti-government protesters, and pro and anti-drug legalization protesters, civil rights activists, and homosexual rights activists. This influenced more of what was known as the counterculture movement, according to Joyce Chepkemoi in her article, What Was the Counterculture of the 1960s and 1970s, from the 2018 publication of the World Atlas. Counterculture is a movement that opposes mainstream culture and is typically expressed in protests. At a time where the country was in political and social upheaval, the Woodstock Festival was an event that united all different types of communities. It countered the struggle of violence influenced by the Vietnam War and gave reason for groups of people to coexist together in peace. Even though concertgoers had to endure the poor conditions at the festival, it showed the nation how powerful music's influence was. The Woodstock Music Festival of 1969 was a wild event that would go down in music history. The organizers had no clue how the festival was going to turn out and how much of an impact it would have made for people all over the country. Even though there were many issues, people found it to be a cathartic experience filled with peace during troubling times. Coachella, too, was influenced by the Woodstock Festival in hopes of creating a similar impact. Maybe the next time Coachella comes around, you could think about how it's a smaller version of the Woodstock Festival, only much safer.